Folks, welcome back to Consolidating Power. Today we're going to do a tier list of what I think most of the playable leaders for Eternal are going to be. But before we get into that, I just want to talk very briefly about the last 2 weeks of competitive play I've been involved in. And here we've got a great picture from Bilbao, the regional qualifier in Spain, with some of the other members of Team Nexus. So huge shout out to them. And of course to Spellbound Games in London, which is our sponsor. We've got our sick jerseys here, which we debuted in Bilbao. And we had a couple members of the team along with us here. Not everyone's pictured in this picture, but a big shout out right next to me there is Ollie, Mr. Big O Notation, who's taken down 2 PQs this past weekend in the UK. So yeah, big shout out to him. Yeah, the qualifier in Spain. I mean, it went well. It was fun. The premiere, I played Tulls in red and went 6-3. So always a bridesmaid, never a bride. Not making day two there, but that's all right. And then the premiere went pretty badly. I brought Palp Yellow and I matched in tons and tons and tons of aggro. 4 Cad Bane weenies, Sabine, a Boba. Yeah, it was rough, and I was pretty tilted by the end of the day because of just an interaction I had with one of the other players, rule sharking. So don't do that. No rule sharking, people. It's bad for you. Um, and then this past weekend, I played in a PQ here in Germany, in Kassel, which I brought my other deck, which was Chancellor. Chancellor Blue, and that didn't go very well either. Out of 6 rounds or 7 rounds, I played 4 Palpatine Yellows, which is one of the worst matchups, I think, for the deck. I did win one of them. I drew 2 of the others. Yeah, rough day. And so I was having a bit of a crisis about what I was going to play in Munich next week. And it's still kind of up in the air for me but I certainly think I'm retiring my Emperor Palpatine for the rest of Premiere. So yeah, we'll see what I play. It's probably going to be Chancellor, but um, maybe I swerve at the last minute. So yeah, just some great pictures here from the Fanfinity team, and yeah, big shout out to Krishiv, Ibo Academy on YouTube, who did some of the casting for the event. It was brilliant. He had put me on his I forget what you call it, his pools, like racing pools of who he thought was going to win. And I'm very sorry to have disappointed him, but he had said in the interview, or not the interview, but the podcast that Team Nexus had put up on the YouTube last week that he had to stop himself from saying glup shitto so much because of my rant video. So I got a big kick out of that. And also shout out to the random German guy at the Castle PQ last week who was like, "Oh, I recognize you from your videos. You did a Glup Shido rant, didn't you?" So that was a lot of fun. So yeah, I'm glad that people are interested in the channel and they're finding it a good time. I'm becoming more confident as we go along because the that first intro video I did was pretty embarrassing. I was so nervous. So, but nobody's here to listen to me talk about the last 2 weeks. But I look forward to seeing anybody in Munich next week. So yeah, come say hi. I'll be in the jersey with a lot of the other members of the team. But let's talk about tier list. So, tier list for Eternal. First, I'm going to say I didn't put all the leaders up here. I limited myself to 20 because I don't want to be here all day, and neither do you. But I'm going to use some of them to talk about archetypes. For example, I'll use Emperor Palpatine to talk about a specific archetype in this tier list. So, mm-mm-mm. So first off, let's go through the tier rankings here. I've got S tier, which is going to be, of course, S tier leaders. Playable, which are leaders I think are pretty much in the meta right now in Premiere that probably have some game into Eternal, but you have to ask yourself the question on the playable tier list: why am I not just playing S tier? I mean that's going to be an important question when we get to who the S tier is. We all should know who the 4 leaders there are, but then there's going to be some leaders to keep an eye on that I don't think are there just yet for Eternal, but are either pretty close or if they get the right support, are definitely going to be contenders in the future. I've got a Taco Bell combo tier here for those people who like combo decks. There's a few leaders here that I think again you can keep an eye on that are probably memes in most situations, but maybe let's say like 2 years out, there's going to be something there. And finally, the Bendu tier. This is completely unplayable tier, and I'm just using this as a stand-in for any leader I don't think is going to be worthwhile at all in Eternal. And I'm using Bendu Tier as a shout out to the Bendu boys in London who always beg me for shout outs. So there you guys go. You guys are in the unplayable tier. And just to get us started there, I'm going to put Finn as representing all of the completely unplayable leaders in Eternal. So if your favorite leader isn't up here, why isn't Glupshido? Why isn't Glupshido on the tier list? Oh, they're in the Bendu tier. I'm just not listing them there for you. So I'm going to kind of think about how to break this down here, but let's go ahead and start with the S tier leaders because we all know who they are deep down, especially because of the ban list in Premiere and how this is going to carry over to Eternal. But I'll be pretty brief with them because let's just start with who I think is going to be the most powerful leader in Eternal, and that's going to be Django. I think you have to ask yourself why you're not playing a Django deck. In Eternal when you sit down to it, which isn't necessarily healthy for the format. And I wouldn't be surprised to see Django eat a ban in the first year of the format. But he does everything, right? He's he's tempo. He's running some of the best cards in the game. Triple Dark Raid, right? He's tapping down your board to put you behind. He's going to burn you out. He can also control you. He kind of does everything, and you can build the deck in a couple different ways. I'd be interested in playing a Django Blue, for example. It doesn't. Not everything has to be Django Red, but Django Red is probably going to be the number one deck in Eternal. I think he's even more broken than Boba. But yeah, that's something you're going to have to contend with. Is you're going to be playing a lot of Django. If you hate Django, well, I've said this in another video, but Eternal isn't going to be for everybody. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. That's why we've got Premiere. That's why we've got Twin Suns. That's why we got Limited. There's a format out there for you. But Eternal is going to be the place for the most powerful decks in the game. And Django is most representative of this. Let's go ahead and follow up with the next three, who I think are actually all on similar power levels, but they are also going to be the best decks in the game following Django. And that's going to be Boba, of course, Han 2, and Han 1. So these aren't any particular order here, but I think Boba he is of course very good. Of course he's got resource advantage, and let me put a pin in this really quick. Is in my Guide to Eternal video, I had said what we need to look out for on leaders to be playable in Eternal is three things. Really four things, but the three things I said were a leader that gives you a resource advantage, a leader that gives you a card advantage, or a leader that has some sort of built-in control. And the fourth one, which we'll get to when we talk about some of these other leaders, is they have an inherent way of breaking the game. Django does several of these things, right? But our other leaders up here, as I said in that video, all have some sort of resource advantage, card advantage, inbuilt control way of breaking the game. Now, Boba obviously has resource advantage, and he's coming out early. He's got great stats. And Boba's armor makes him incredible, of course. But I think he's kind of outclassed in some ways by some of the other leaders, definitely by Django. In fact, I might put him to the bottom here because he's really, when you break it down, he's going to be a great tempo leader that allows you to play more cards on a turn. But if he gets tapped down by Django, it's kind of it for him, right? He's just going to be a solid all-around leader for a deck that you're uncertain on what you want to play. I think if you have a deck idea and you don't know what to do with it, your first place, your first port of call will probably be Django. Now, Han 1 and Han 2 both cheat resources in various ways. Han 1, we obviously fell out in many ways. Han Yellow specifically because of the DJ ban. Well, of course, DJ is back in Eternal. And I mean, I'm kind of interested in trying that, I'm not going to lie. But when you have DJ combined with Qui-Gon's Aether Sprite, is one card I really have an eye on to break that deck. You get to double DJ somebody on the 5 resource turn. I think that is going to be the path for Han Yellow to win. I mean, cheating resources is always good in any case, but the thing that Han suffers with, of course, is hand control, which is why I think Han 2 is a little bit above him here, especially because Force Throw is going to be legal in the format. Now, Han 2, I think, is the best mid-range deck right now, at least hero mid-range, we should say. And you could do a lot of things with this. People have been doing Data Vault, ECL, Blue Force, Green Force. There's a lot you could do with this leader, and he's probably going to be the best repository for any Force decks, which I'm going to talk about Force a little bit later, but if you want to play a Force deck, it's probably going to be a Hantu. I mean, the fact that he could just play big broken cards earlier is going to push him over the edge, of course. Um, he's also probably going to be the best way to aggro right now. Django, of course, is very good, but we're seeing that Hantu's beating Sabine in terms of the aggro meta right now, and I think that's probably going to continue. So these are our Elite Four, to use a Pokemon term, of course, is going to be our Djangos, our Boba, and our two Hans. But let's talk very briefly about what other stuff I think is going to probably be immediately playable in Eternal. Now, I haven't put everything here, of course. I haven't put Quinlan or Cad or some of these other sort of, tier one but not S tier leaders up here, mostly because you need to ask yourself is why are you not just playing an S tier leader when you choose to sit down with Cad? Why aren't you just playing Boba? Why aren't you just playing Jago? Same thing with Quinlan, right? I think Han too is just going to be a better version of that deck. But you can bring those, and I think they'll be certainly playable. So that's just my pin in that for now. But let's start with Thrawn here. Thrawn was already on the cusp, and I think with set six he really gets pushed over the edge, especially Thrawn Red. We're getting cards like Admiral Ozzel in the Hoth set, which a double discard on really turn 2/3 is going to be really really strong. I mean, any when defeated effect really needs to treat with Thrawn in a very powerful way, I think. He's got a lot of value. He's able to control. You could build interesting burn decks with him. I think he's certainly going to be a player in Eternal. Along those lines, let's take a peek here. I'll talk about Yoda very briefly. Yoda here I have just as a stand-in for decks like Rey, right? And I think Rey is sort of outclassed by Yoda at this point, just because Yoda can control the game. Yoda's got card advantage. When Yoda has some combo potential with You're My Only Hope, of course. So I think these grindy blue-green value shells that play lots of crappy units that heal and draw you cards. Yoda is probably the premier leader for that right now. But again, it's a question of why not Hantu, for example. But Yoda is most representative of that category. Um, let's look at Kylo next. Now, I think Kylo's kind of interesting here. The Force Throw ban obviously takes a lot from Kylo Red, and I think that deck is very interesting and certainly very strong, seeing as how I did in Vegas. But the reason I put Kylo here is I think Kylo might be is a big cope, hot take, whatever you want to take say from it, is I think Kylo is going to be our best hard control leader. Um, and the reason I say that is he's got this very, very low barrier to entry card draw on him, right? Discard to upgrade, draw a card. That's that's almost no requirement at all. And it allows Kylo to really filter through his deck faster than a lot of other leaders. Um, and I've seen people play Kylo Data Vault, and maybe something along those lines is probably what I mean by the hard control. But I think if you're going to play a mill deck, a hard control deck where you're not really playing many units, what you do is you just draw through your deck, put in all the game-ending upgrades into your discard, mill them out, and then deploy Kylo, who's a 2020 or whatever it'll be in Eternal, and you kill them that way. I think Kylo is going to be our best hard control leader. Um, these aren't really in any order, but let's talk about somebody from set six that I think is I don't want to say underrated right now, but certainly untested. And I think that Dryden is really strong. I think the fact that you have a leader that just is ECL every turn, if you want it to be, is really, really good. This is possibly going to get us into a tempo-oriented gameplay that you're allowed to trade with their units, keep yours alive. If we can get units that draw you cards as you do it, Dryden is going to be really kind of a scary deck. And let's see how it goes. But I'm willing to put him on this probably immediately playable tier for Eternal. I mean, the fact that you can repeatedly use him is it makes him a little bit different from something like Boba ECL, which is only going to get the ECL once. Dryden can do it every turn if he wants to. So I really like his potential there. This might be everybody in the playables here. I guess I'll put Anakin at the very bottom of this, and I'll use him to talk about something here. So I think Anakin was probably sort of kicked out of the meta in many ways, especially with the force throw ban. And, you know, if Django is in the field, Django's just going to be able to tap down Anakin, of course. But all of this changes, and what I wanted to lead on to with Anakin here was pilot leaders. Before the cards for set six were spoiled, I was convinced that no pilot leader, zero pilot leaders were playable in Eternal, purely because of Bamboozle and Django. Both of these being here, that Django can tap down the pilot leader, you're putting all your eggs in one basket, and then Bamboozle just killing all the pilot leaders, including Luke, right? I was going to say that none of them were playable. However, with the introduction of set six's card, probably the most powerful card in the set, which is Cinta, now pilot leaders are back on the table. And to this end, I think Anakin is also sort of back on the table with that you could deploy Anakin where he's very big and immediately swing with him using Cinta with plot. I think is really going to be something to watch out for. Anakin, again, might be in that sort of shell, the sort of blue or maybe green shell that is probably better supplanted by something like Han 2. But if you like the playstyle of Anakin where he's able to trade into things, trade up, get some value that way, you might be cooking. So let's talk about the pilot leaders. I'm going to use Luke here, and I think I'll put him on the bottom here of the playable. I think Luke is probably going to be the best of the pilot leaders now purely because of Cinta. Um, I mean, he's going to be able to put out ridiculous amounts of damage. You deploy him onto the like tactical bomber, the resistance tactical bomber. With Cinta, you're swinging for I think it's like 12 or 13 damage. It's something ridiculous, and I'm wondering if Luke is going to be the new face of what an aggro deck in Eternal might look like. You'll notice I don't have Sabine on here. I think you can play Sabine again. Sabine is playable, but you have to keep in mind Django, for example, Han 2. These decks are just crushing Sabine right now, and I think the new face of aggro might be a space aggro using something like Luke plus Cinta. Um, okay, let's go ahead and go down to the Taco Bell combo tier because I think the most interesting ones, points of discussion are actually going to be in this keep an eye on tier. But in Taco Bell combo, I'm just going to put Grand Inquisitor here because, well, there's the Darth Treya infinite combo that we've talked about. And I think on paper, Grand Inquisitor's ability is very strong. The problem is that he's such a late deploy and that, you know, it hasn't been that impactful. But the more we get sort of broken on attack abilities with low power, the better Grand Inquisitor gets. And we have one infinite combo. That's, of course, expensive and probably not that great right now, has a lot of ways to disrupt it. But if we start pushing that curve down where we get more infinites or more better on attack skills that are earlier in the game, Grand Inquisitor might pop off. Also on this tier, I'm gonna put Pre Vizsla. Now, why is Pre Vizsla here? Well, I know this is sort of clickbaity, but Pre Vizsla's ability I personally find very interesting. I'm not saying he's going to be playable. I'm not saying he's going to be meta defining, but the fact you can do damage equal to the amount of cards you draw on your turn. If we begin to start getting what in Magic is called a cantrips, which are very cheap events that also draw you a card. And if we start getting things that cost one cost or zero cost events that say, do something minor, draw a card, or do something minor, draw two cards, if you can fill his deck with a bunch of very cheap ways to draw cards, we might have something in Magic that's sort of called a Storm deck. And what Storm was is the more cards you play on one turn, you could do like more damage, or you could sort of do a huge combo. And I'm wondering if Pre Vizsla has like a deck of 50 draw card, you know, cheap draw card things, and maybe some sort of payoff that says based on the number of cards you draw this turn, we might get an interesting kind of Storm deck with Pre Vizsla that allows you to sort of control things, and then you flip him, and he's really big with all the stats. Then you play like aggressive negotiations and swing for a billion, right? There might be something with Pre Vizsla. Um, what other Taco Bell combo leaders did I have here? Um, Cassian might be better than this, but I just have him here sort of in the role of also Churret, right? Because both Cassian and Churret are very similar, that they can't really be killed on the turn they flip, more or less, right? And I'm sure Cassian probably is better than this. It's just going to depend on how he ends up testing, right, when set six comes out. But this is a leader that inherently breaks the game in some way, right? That you just can't kill him, and then units that have tacked can't be. I don't remember the text specifically on him. They can't be attacked themselves, I think, right? So this is an ability that inherently breaks the game and might push him into some sort of defining tier in the future. Okay, let's talk about the keep an eye ons here. And this is where I'm going to have some interesting things, I think. First off, I want to start with Mon Mothma in set six. I think she's really powerful. This might be a hot take. I know she doesn't look great on paper, but especially in the future as we get more non-villainy officials, she's going to be even more powerful. But actually, I think she's really good as it stands right now. First off, is I think she's probably the best platform to run one of these sort of big, wide, sort of token deck boards, right? These token deck like Unity of Purpose. She's the best platform to run Unity of Purpose, or what I plan on doing with her, which is sort of Chancellor Palpatine, Clone Wars, the Queen Amidala card. I think these are all very interesting with Mon Mothma, and I think if you want to play one of these board dominating or board flooding decks, she's going to be the first place to stop. I want to talk about Emperor Palpatine very briefly here, and I like Palpatine. I'm going to kind of retire him. I think I'm a little bit sick of the deck, but he's good. Obviously, he's very strong, but he's so expensive. And my first question is why? How is he even going to be able to survive late in the game, long enough to match with something like Django or Han 1 being double DJ'd, right? I think is just going to be very, very difficult ask for him. But in the same category, I'm going to actually put Admiral Piet along with Palpatine because what we're missing right now from the game is earlier ramp. And I know we already have early ramp with Super Laser Tech Resupply, for example, but what we really need is something like in Magic, there are these things called elves, like Lord of the Rings elves, right? Which are units that you could play on turn one and on turn two allow you to tap them for a resource. And we have a couple things like that in the game, like Bib Fortuna, and so on and so forth. But the problem is that those are limited to specific things. Bib Fortuna, you can only play events. What we really need is an elf, like a Bib Fortuna card that allows you to tap it as a resource, or to count itself as a resource, so that when you play it, for example, on turn one, you are now counting as having three resources so that you can deploy Palpatine. For example, if you had five resources and three of these elf kind of units out, you could deploy Palpatine. That is what we really need to be able to push ramp decks over the top. So give us more early ramp in the game, especially unit-based ramp, and I think we can start to play decks like Palpatine and Piet more effectively. Speaking of Palpatine, I'm of course going to put my pet leader here, which is Chancellor Palpatine. I love him so much, and the fact that he plays four colors, right? You're playing white, black, yellow, and then whatever your paired color is. I think at some point he's just going to reach a critical mass of everything in the deck is just broken, and he's really the only leader that can really deal with that. For example, I'm of the opinion he's one of the best Anakin decks because he's running both black and white. You don't have to jump through as many loopholes as Han 2, for example, does. Of course, Kylo is a little better with Anakin, but I really like Chancellor and Anakin. Um, Han Solo here probably can get moved to the top, actually. Just along with the pilots, I think even with Bamboozle existing, and if Cinta didn't exist, the Han Solo jump to lightspeed pilot, I think, was playable, and I think he generates a really interesting resource advantage based on the number of odds in your deck. And with set six, plot has a very interesting interaction with Han 4 here, the pilot Han, because you can, I don't know the specifics, and there's other great videos about this out there already, but essentially when he deploys, you can put out all your plot stuff, and then you can do his ability, which will count all your different odds from the plot and untap all those resources. So that's very nice. And finally, just another leader to keep an eye on here is the Mandalorian. Now, the Mandalorian, I don't think has seen any real meta play whatsoever, but actually his ability is quite strong, sort of like Django in a way. And the problem is that we don't have enough good, cheap upgrades in the game yet. But again, if we ever reach a critical mass of upgrades that cost zero, for example, that have at least some sort of interesting or good ability, upgrades that cost one or zero, maybe the Mandalorian pops off then and it starts to able control the board in a way that Django also controls the board. Now you notice I've left Mother Talzin here, and I want to use this opportunity to talk about the Force mechanic. So, hot take, I don't think the Force mechanic is that good. I think many of the Force leaders are very bad. Some of this is sort of defined by Vegas, where the only real Force decks that got anywhere was Han 2 and Talzin, right? Now, I know Talzin's won a lot of events. Don't get me wrong. I think Talzin's a good leader. But I think the Force mechanic just doesn't have the payoffs needed to send it over the edge for me, especially in Eternal. I think it's good in Premier, but in Eternal, you're going to need to play all of these Force units that probably aren't going to survive to attack to get the Force, right? Django's going to tap them down, or the removal in Eternal is going to be so cheap. You're going to get ambushed in with Boba. You know, you're not going to be able to get the Force as much as you like, meaning you're going to need to run one of the 25 health Force bases. And what are you using this to pay off for? To give something -1/-1, to play some overcosted units that have a when played ability to use the Force. I'm just not that convinced. So I'm gonna actually put Talzin, hot take. I'm gonna put her down here in the Bendu tier. I don't think the Force is gonna be worth running, and if you are gonna run the Force, you might as well run it with one of the S tier leaders. Like just run Django Red Force or Boba Blue Force, right? If you want to play a villainy Force deck. So let me know in the comments what you fiercely disagree with, why your favorite Glup Shadow leader I didn't even mention isn't on here, how much you disagree with me on the Force take. But hopefully this has given you some interesting perspectives on what's going on in the post rotation meta, at least what to me makes good leaders. So I look forward to seeing some of you guys in Munich next week. Until next time, thanks very much.